It's on. Hey, everybody. It's Coach John Smay, CrossFit Massimo Prove It Team, North Collingwood, Ontario here. And I have with me Coach Kyle Radaker from the US of A. I also have on here triathlete coach from Collingwood, Ontario, Andrew Flynn, if I am pronouncing that correct, and with other promoter, Shirley Williams, as well. And so, Kyle, Andrew is obviously with Shirley, and Shirley has been doing her best talking about ketones, but neither Shirley nor I have the wherewithal to talk the language that you started to talk there, and that's why I want to stop you, and then if we get an opportunity, maybe I can still forward this information to other people who are asking in the future. So if everybody's okay with that, say aye.
Aye.
Hi.
Awesome. So, Andrew, Kyle started talking there. By all means, jump in and ask him what you want. Andrew's kicking the tires, and he's looking for really data and basically the results that you've seen, Kyle. So I'll let you guys chat, and Shirley and I will be a fly on the wall and just try and absorb what you guys are talking about technically.
That sounds great. So, all right, well, let's kind of get back to where we were, before we push record, and I'll just start out a little bit, and then maybe we can go from there. Probably the best start is to let people know that I've been working with endurance athletes, triathletes, cyclists, runners, all the way up to performance athletes for powerlifting and just training purposes, personal aesthetics and whatnot for the past 15 years. And I really base everything I do off of using a metabolic cart to perform their assessments. And that's really a twofold assessment. The first is I measure resting metabolic rate, synonymous to basal metabolic rate or resting energy rate. And with that, and here's the unique thing for what we might want to delve into or dive a little deeper into today, is I get a respiratory quotient or respiratory exchange ratio reading, and that tells me the scale of how much carbohydrate somebody is burning versus fat. And so that's at the resting portion of the assessment. Then I move them to a graded exercise test, and that can be performed on either a bike or a treadmill, as you know, and it's just graded exercise. It's starting out at a very easy rate, every 2 to 3 minutes, increasing the level of intensity until somebody gets to the point where they are maxed out or they can't go any further. And the unique thing, again, is to be able to look at the respiratory quotient or the respiratory exchange ratio as they go through or progress through different levels of intensity and see what happens to what we would, in a fancy way call substrate utilization, or which energy system they're burning from. So that's what I've been doing for a while, and worked with a lot of endurance athlete coaches, and then developed kind of a following of athletes the same.
Awesome.
So Kyle, before, obviously that's all good information. Before we get into that, do you mind just letting me know a little bit when you say endurance athletes, what are we talking about?
Cyclists, runners, triathletes, and these are individuals.
Distances?
Sprint, Olympic, all the way to half and full. I'm currently working with, I'll just say somebody that I've worked with in the past and have had on Facebook Live to talk about what we do with her training. She's getting ready for a full now. So we're kind of transitioning from 70.3 to 140.6 full Ironman Louisville.
Okay.
And then runners are anywhere from, reindeer run to 5Ks that are competitive 5Ks, all the way to half marathons and full marathons.
Okay. Where would you say the majority of your clients are?
The majority of what? I'm sorry.
The majority of your clients, where do they lie? More in the longer distance, or more in the sport of sprint, shorter distances?
That's a tough question, because I really do run the gamut. If you're talking about specifically the ones that call me in and need a little bit further view from me, it would be 70.3.
Okay.
That's a very typical, that half Ironman is, very popular.
All right. And so I guess based on my conversation with Shirley and with John and stuff like that, I'm intrigued to know how you introduce the ketones to your clients. Because I was told that most of your athletes are on ketones, all of them, some of them. I don't know how that works. So I'm just intrigued.
It's really up to the individual, but after we're able to look at what happens with their measurements of RQ, their respiratory quotient, and where they're burning, I would say at least half of the people that I work with or more end up using ketones, and it's because they learn about the importance of substrate utilization.
Right.
And for our purposes, we can easily call that glycogen sparing. Because when it comes down to, you know, the longer the event or the longer the course, the more that managing energy becomes the issue, right? Cardiovascularly wise, we've already established what their FTP functional power is on a bike. We've already established what their pace can and should be on the run based upon their goal. The question is, will they have an energy system or a metabolic profile that allows them to sustain those efforts? And that's energy management.
Right. Sorry, keep going. Sorry.
No, I was going to say, so how do we do that? I mean, historically, we know that we can manipulate training intensity over time, or a periodization progression model. We know that we can do that. Then we talk about how do we incorporate just a regular diet or approach to eating into that, right? Then when we marry those two together and we can layer, let's say, cycling of diet with cycling of intensities of training, and then we can add on to that proper supplementation. Now we've really got 1 + 1 + 1 that equals 5.
Right. Okay. Did you use them before you passed them on to your clients? How did you do that?
Yeah. So this client that I'm working with now, getting ready for the long for Louisville, she came to me about 2 years ago. And when I tested her, I was shocked at how low her RQ was on her resting metabolic rate assessment. I mean, it was like a 0.72, which means you're burning basically 100% from fat at rest. So, you know, that kind of made me raise my eyebrows. And we went on and did the VO2 portion, the graded exercise test. And she never went above 9 on her RQ, even though from a cardiorespiratory standpoint, she had gotten a crossover, right?
Yeah.
So I knew that she was above what we would historically or typically call lactate threshold, or the way that I measure anaerobic threshold. But she never went above 0.9. So I'll give you kind of a phrase I normally use with people that was the opposite with her. Normally I say, your cardiorespiratory system is writing checks that your substrate utilization can't cash.
Okay.
In other words, your ability, your cardiorespiratory engine is bigger than your ability to maintain energy to support it. She was the opposite.
Right.
So her metabolic system was capable of supporting her through higher efforts of training.
Okay.
And so I just thought that was interesting. So I asked her, just out of curiosity, what do you do with your diet? And she said, well, I use exogenous ketones. And I said, oh, I've never heard of them before. What is that? I'd never heard of them.
Okay.
And so she said, well, I have a friend of mine who introduced me to them a little while ago, and I've been using them. And she showed me the package, and I was like, it's salt. I mean, seriously, dude, like, how effective can that be? So we agreed that I wouldn't really mess with her too much on her supplementation.
Okay.
Would give her some advice on her diet relative to the different training intensities that we would be following.
Okay.
And we would see what happened. So she did Augusta that year, and she did like 20 minutes better than she had done the year before. And the year before, as well trained and well fed as she was really starting to bonk or fatigue in the latter half of the run.
Okay.
And so this year she came in, this was 2 years ago now, she came in with a stride and a kick. So I started to pay attention at that point, and I met with the guy that she originally had learned about exogenous ketones from, and his name is Rob DeVore. And so I met with Rob, and he came down, and we talked for about 15 minutes. And it began to get, into some of the science of it. He said, do me a favor, let's just stop talking about it, and why don't I have you try them? And so I said, great. And I tried them with the idea that, I just see how I felt for, a couple weeks, maybe a month. And honest to God, 3 days later, I called him back and said, how do I get more of these? I'm in.
What change did you have? What change did you? Because I've been on them for a while now, and I'm just trying to figure out what changes I'm supposed to be finding.
Yes, I just found for me initially it really sharpened my mental focus and clarity, and it gave me sustained energy through latter parts of the day. So that was just the first thing for me that I noticed taking them.
Okay.
And then secondarily to that is I normally run an RQ that's about 8.2 to 8.4, somewhere in there. And when I got on and scaled my own RQ, I was down to a 0.75. And that was within a 4-week period, no changes to my training.
So when you pass this on to your clients, have you done any testing where, because I mean, and I'm not being skeptical, I'm just trying to really honestly figure this out. You coach somebody, right?
Right.
So if you had people, now obviously we're going to be different because everyone reacts to these things differently, right?
Right.
So do you have a control group of people who are doing your training but aren't on ketones, and people who have been on ketones with the same training? And have you done that type of research?
I wouldn't say to the extent that you're looking for, like, do I have a research study group going on where I have a control, a placebo, and then people who are taking ketones, nobody knows what's up, and compare them? No, I don't.
Okay. I'm honestly just trying to figure out where the coaching then, where it becomes about coaching and where it becomes about the ketones
yeah, I mean, it's really simple. If somebody's showing a positive response and they're feeling good and liking what they're doing, then they stay on them. If it's something that they're like, I don't really know if I see a difference and we're not getting a change in their variable RQ reading, then maybe we need to reconsider. But I guess the thing that I would do is say, where are the studies on GU or Chomps or Chew? Where are the studies on those? Where are the studies on Gatorade, for example? Where does that really say anything where you have controls and not controls? So I kind of go to a premise of, and it's kind of what we stated before, if I can put somebody into a state where they're going to be sparing glycogen and we can prolong the use of glycogen, I'm all for it. So the next topic of discussion there would be, what if we create athletes that are dual fueled, that they utilize both? And all we're saying is we want you to go to your glycogen or your sugar type, carbohydrate type of a supplement later in the race, as late as possible.
Right. So obviously your clients love you. I'm sure they love you. What happens if you I'm big on sort of like, obviously I take my clients' trust in me very seriously, like we all do, right?
Sure.
So you recommend this. I mean, let's face it, as soon as you're suggesting something, irregardless of what it is, you're sort of putting your name behind it, right? You know what I mean?
Yes, sir.
Of course you are. So as soon as you do that, if it doesn't work for them,
right?
Relationship okay still with the clients, with the athletes, or what? Like how does that work? Because I'd be concerned about that, I guess.
Right. Yeah. Well, I've never had a problem with that because it's not something that I say, listen, if you're going to work with me, you've got to take ketones. If you don't, hit the road.
I understand that, but if you're promoting it or suggesting it,
right,
and then because it's not just kind of like you're saying, hey, eat more vegetables, whatever, eat more protein. You're asking, I'm assuming you're asking people to buy these things, right? Like now it's
right.
Kyle, if I may, he's asking, how do you actually bring up the conversation? How do you introduce it? And then how do you go about testing people to see if it is something that would be viable for their DNA, right? And how many athletes would you have using the product now? And are they seeing results, those that have stayed on the product? Sorry, Andrew,
Okay. Yeah. Well, I just bring it up because it's very simple for me when I'm doing their metabolic assessments. And that is one thing that, well, people send their athletes to me, but also something that when I work with people, I require them to do. And so I'm doing a metabolic assessment where I'm immediately analyzing and talking to people about exactly what we're talking about. How is your body burning fat relative to carbohydrate, or vice versa? And if that profile is high, in other words, they're relying too heavily on carbohydrate, we want to do two things. We want to examine their macros, and then we want to use any supplementation we can to support what we would call a strong aerobic base, right?
Right.
So for me, it's really not a difficult conversation. And it goes along with other lines of questioning, like, do you experience GI distress when you're in your long, volume types of training, and
Right.
what are you using for supplements? And we know that, a sugar-based supplement could be the cause of a GI issue
Right.
in their training, in their lungs. So it's an opportunity to educate and give them something else to try. If it works, that's fantastic. If it doesn't, we keep moving down the list. But I've had such a high level of success myself with the clients that I work with that, I pretty much have the conversation with everybody.
Right. Okay. And then that conversation leads to obviously them buying the stuff. And as we said, again, going back to one of the things I was bringing up, if it doesn't work for them, right?
Right.
Does that have any impact at all because it is a financial investment. It's not just kind of like, hey, do more of this. You're kind of suggesting something, which inherently means that you're supporting it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't work for them because, I'm guessing, and I could be wrong, and I don't know enough about this, but I'm guessing it's like most other things. It's not going to work for everybody.
Right.
Unless it magically does, but I don't think it would work for everybody because that's just like anything, right? Like not everyone's going to react positively to everything. If it doesn't react well for someone or it doesn't perform for them, how do those conversations work for you? Is that a reflection of you or do they take responsibility themselves for that? Right.
It's honestly, it's never come down to that being a reflection on me.
Okay.
It's like, for example, we'll have conversations frequently with people about, like, on their bike, what kind of a bike setup do they want? And you know how it goes. Somebody goes out and does a race or two, and now they want to be on a tri-bike.
Yeah.
And so I have a conversation with them about, well, let's talk about the geometry of a tri-bike versus a road bike.
Yep.
And we can set your road bike up to be very comfortable, but a lot of people want to get on a tri-bike. So I'd say, okay, why don't you try it first and see how you feel? Now, if they decide they want to get the tri-bike and they go out and then they experience some tightness in their lower back or their run changes, that's not on me. They made the decision. All I did was try to educate them,
right?
One way or the other, or wetsuits or aero bars, or another thing that I used to do all the time is in the run, I would say, if you see Coca-Cola out on the course, don't drink Coca-Cola until the end, because once you start drinking it, you're committed.
Right.
Now, sometimes they wouldn't listen to me and they'd go out and they drink the Coca-Cola early and then they try to stop and now they got a problem.
Yeah.
Right. So, to me, it's not categorically different than any other thing that I recommend or talk about with people in their coaching.
And are you, because I'm trying to think of a model that works, right?
Right.
And because I'm also trying to be very cognizant of the fact that I'm not trying to, I wouldn't say double dip, but I'm not trying to make more money off my clients, right, as athletes. Right. So are you a promoter yourself? Would they buy through you, or like, because I'm sort of thinking like, would I almost set up like as one remove, like let's say they buy through Shirley, so it's not something where I'm necessarily involved in that. It's their choice. They do what they want, but I'm not looking like I'm further profiting from them. Do you understand that? Like,
I do. I guess I just see that differently, and that's
and that's the other thing. I could be overthinking it, 100%.
I think that you're probably overthinking it, and the only reason I can say that is because I think I was in the same place initially.
Yeah.
And it's because I wasn't comfortable with the information, the product myself initially. But the more comfortable I became with what it does, because again, I can measure it. I can measure, where was your RQ? Where was your substrate utilization before? Where is it now? And I've seen the change time and time again. I would take pictures of results and send them to Rob and be like, oh my gosh, this shit really works. And so we would get very excited about it. And so now I guess there's just a level of confidence and comfort that I have with it. Yeah. That I tell people right up front, listen, I'm going to let you know right now, I'm a promoter and I sell this. I don't promote it because I want to make money off of it or because I have some sort of a, supplemental income from it. I'm promoting it because it works, not the other way around.
Right.
It's the same for me though.
Okay. Okay.
So, and then, you know, in terms of getting people to try it at first, you can even say, listen, I'm not suggesting you go out and spend hundreds of dollars on it. I always am willing to sell people, 5 or 10 packs so that they don't even have to get set up on it, so to speak, initially, and say, look, here's a trial pack. Let's incorporate it into your routine and into your training and see if it works for you. If you like it, great. Because they can, when I say you, I mean the individual, can now get themselves set up in such a way that if they're going to use it, they can get it at a much more reasonable price than just buying it from me.
Right. Okay.
Now, they don't have to. They can buy it from me. I can wholesale it to them as well. And we have 1 or 2, endurance sport businesses in town that do that. They just put it out on the shelves and people can buy it. And then if they continue to use it, they educate them and say, by the way, did you know that you can set it up and get a discount on it?
Right.
Which you can cancel at any time. So, again, we go full circle, but it's no different than any other type of a supplement or something that they do with training.
Right. Right. Okay.
I also sell my services to review people's nutrition on a weekly basis too. So I promote that part of my business as well. Sometimes people do it. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes people do it and they're like, I'm not really getting anything out of this. I'm going to not do that part. Because we're big people that emphasize, and I'm sure you believe this too. Do you know the best program in the world?
It's the one that works.
It's the one they'll do, right? So if I tell them, look, I'm going to watch your macros and help you out for a while, and then they're like, I'm just not going to do that. Okay, that's fine. People have different levels of commitment and what they're willing to do, and that's fine.
Right. Okay.
Cool.
Good. Thank you. I don't have any more questions.
Very good. Thanks. Well, it's nice talking to y'all. Thanks for including me in the conversation. If there's anything else I can help you with in the future, please don't hesitate to reach out. I always like to.
Thank you very much. That's very good. Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you.
I have a question.
Thank you.
I have one question.
Go ahead.
I have one question. So Kyle, from an endurance standpoint, if someone's training for long distance endurance, whether it's running or cycling or triathlon, do you have them incorporate more carbs than normal? Because for me, and I own the yoga and spin studio here, I get a lot of endurance cyclists in, and they're like, I don't understand how I can just stay and use the fat fuel source then, and I don't need glucose.
Right. That's funny because for me, it's directly the opposite. The longer course somebody's going to go, the more that I go through periods of restricting or lowering their carbohydrate intake to keep them fat adapted. And then as we're bringing carbohydrate back in, and I would say for the last 2 to 3 weeks prior to an event, we start bringing more carbohydrate back in. Why? Because I want to make sure that they're tolerating the carbohydrate at that point. The last thing we want to do is bring carbohydrate in a week before. Now they do have GI because they didn't develop the enzymes. Right. So if it's somebody who's going to be doing short course, when I back their carbs down, it's not a lot because they're just kind of anaerobic the whole time, right? They're on the rivet the entire time. Whereas the longer somebody's going, the more we really want to have them fat adapted. Why? Because even the leanest of athletes has 3 or 4 days worth of fat on their body, right? But glycogen, even a well-trained athlete, an endurance athlete, let's just give them 3,000 calories worth of glycogen or carbohydrate in their body, right? If they're not fat adapted, there's no way that they can keep up with the turnover or how much glycogen they're using. So the example I always give them to make sense of that is I say, imagine that your working muscle is like a Dixie cup, and we're going to poke a hole in the bottom. And so what we're doing is we're pouring glycogen in, and hopefully we can keep that going in quicker than the rate it's draining out the bottom of the Dixie cup. Right? But at some point you're left with only putting in what can burn right now, and they can't keep up, and that's why they bonk.
Right. Okay.
So now we just described glycogen sparing, right? If we can push out as long as possible the need to tap into glycogen, then we have endurance. And how do we do that? Well, one is level of intensity. The other is what supplement or food you're consuming while you're in the event. Now we go back to why do we wait so long, if possible, to have Coca-Cola, for example, enter the body? Because once you turn on that glycolytic system, you're done. That's it.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Awesome. That's a great question.
My pleasure.
Kyle, do you know anything about protein synthesis and muscle sparing with ketones? Do you, because you did mention resistance training athletes as well. And if the answer is yes, maybe we can save this for another call. But have you done any sort of testing or seen any results with the effects of utilizing ketones on, say, resistance training, building muscle, and or the recovery model based behind the science that is out there that supports ketones?
Yeah, actually, that's been really very interesting to me. It's why the other instrument that we use for assessment is the InBody, because when we do their weight, who cares about weight? We want to know about body composition, right? So I just did a post on that this morning about BMI versus body weight versus body composition. And so can I see a rise in body composition while I note that there's no change or there's a better adaptation to somebody's burning of fat? So can somebody become more fat adapted and keto adapted and sustain, maybe even build muscle at the same time? The answer is yes. And the reason why is because ketones, especially leucine, are very close. So ketones mimic the amino acid leucine very well. And so that's what helps the body from an energy standpoint sustain the muscle. That's a very quick and raw answer.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate that. That's a great way to sort of end this, and it might just cue into another call, maybe with some more depth with that. That would be awesome. Thank you so much, Kyle. Thank you so much, Shirley. I appreciate you, Andrew, coming with the questions. And I know Kyle appreciates your directness for sure. I see Stephen Sullivan on the call, and glad that you can hop in there, Stephen, from St. John's, Newfoundland. And my beautiful assistant is listening, and Shauna Knowles. Thank you, Shauna. Hopefully you got some information out of this as well. I know you are as big a fan of Kyle's as I am.
And
guys, yeah, awesome. Kyle, if you need anything from me, please let me know.
Yes, sir.
I'm always here to help, vice versa, right? So
Absolutely.
we all pay it forward. Guys, have a happy holidays. I hope that you have time with your families. And if we don't chat before then, have a good one and a happy one.
Thanks, John. Appreciate y'all.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
John.
Thank you, guys.